Consciousness. What is it really? Have you ever stopped to wonder what's happening inside your head right now? I mean, really wonder. You're hearing my voice, you're breathing, you may be sitting somewhere feeling the chair beneath you. You might be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, or maybe you're remembering a conversation you had yesterday. All of this, the insights, the sounds, the thoughts, the feelings, is your conscious experience. But what exactly is it? Where does it come from? Welcome to Blossoming Brains, the podcast where we explore the fascinating world of neuroscience and how it supports lifelong learning. I'm your host, Dr. Vicki Draeger, and as a mother of 5 with over 30 years of teaching experience from preschoolers to those working on their master's degrees, I've always been captivated by the process of learning and the incredible organ that makes it all possible, our brain. Oh, and just in case you've ever wondered how large your brain is, just put your 2 fists together, thumbs touching. That's about the size of your brain. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the greatest mysteries of all science and philosophy: consciousness. What is it really? This single question has puzzled thinkers for centuries. And while we've made incredible strides in understanding the brain, consciousness itself remains deeply enigmatic. In this episode, we'll explore some of the competing theories about what consciousness actually is. We'll journey from the intricate wiring of our neurons to the mind-bending world of quantum physics, and even ask whether consciousness is something that's unique to complex brains like ours, or if it's a fundamental feature of the universe itself. So get comfortable, grab that cup of coffee or tea, and prepare to have your mind, or should I say consciousness, expanded. To start, let's talk about what makes consciousness so difficult to study. In the 1990s, the philosopher David Chalmers famously divided the problem of consciousness into 2 parts: the easy problem and the hard problem. Now, the easy problems are by no means easy. They're the focus of most of modern neuroscience. These are questions about how the brain processes information, how we focus our attention, how we distinguish between being awake and asleep, and how we report our inner states. We can use brain imaging techniques like the functional MRI or the EEG to see which parts of the brain light up when we perform certain tasks. These are the how questions, and we're getting better and better at answering them. But then it comes to the hard problem. The hard problem is the question of why all of that brain processing should feel like anything at all. Why do we have a subjective qualitative experience? Why is there a what it's like to see the color red, or to taste a strawberry, or to feel the warmth of the sun on our skin? This is the mystery of phenomenal experience, and it's what makes consciousness so profoundly baffling. So maybe think of it this way. I can describe to you in perfect detail the wavelength of light that corresponds to the color red, how it hits your retina, the electrical signals that travel up your optic nerve, and the specific neurons that fire in your visual cortex. But none of that explains why you have the inner experience of redness. Why isn't it all just dark? And why are we just biological robots processing information without an inner life? That's the hard problem. Here's something that might surprise you. Even some of the greatest minds in science and philosophy admit there's no clear answer yet. The hard problem exposes a fundamental gap in our understanding. A gap between the objective physical workings of the brain and the subjective quality of our experiences. It's a challenge that pushes us to reconsider what it means to be conscious and even what it means to be human. Imagine for a moment that consciousness is like the taste of chocolate. You can analyze the chemical structure of chocolate. You can describe how it melts in your mouth. You can even map the neural activity when someone eats it. But none of that fully captures the experience of tasting chocolate itself. The sweetness, the bitterness, the texture, that qualitative something it's like is at the heart of the hard problem. Here's the thing. Consciousness is not just an academic curiosity, although it certainly is that. No, it's more. It's deeply tied to what it means to be alive and aware. Think about the difference between a sleeping person and someone awake. Both have brains that are highly active, but their conscious experiences couldn't be more different. The sleeping brain is like a theater with the lights dimmed, the actors backstage. There's processing happening, but no audience watching. When you wake up, the lights come on, the curtains open, and the show begins again. Now, what if I told you that consciousness is also the glue that holds your sense of self together? Without it, the continuous story you tell yourself about who you are, your memories, your hopes, and your fears might just fall apart. Consciousness is like the narrator of your life's movie, guiding the plot and making sense of scenes that otherwise might feel disconnected. And here's something else to consider. Consciousness isn't just about perceiving the world. It's also about acting in it. The way you make decisions, the way you plan your day, how you imagine the future or reflect on the past. All these processes are interwoven with conscious experience. This adds another layer of complexity to the hard problem. How can a physical brain produce not just awareness, but also intentionality, the aboutness of thoughts and desires? So, how are scientists trying to tackle this? One of the most dominant approaches in neuroscience is the search for the neural correlates of consciousness, also just called the NCCs for obvious reasons. The idea here is to find the minimal set of brain activity that is required for a specific conscious experience. If we can pinpoint exactly what's happening in the brain when you see a red apple, for example, then we might be able to understand the physical basis of that experience. Researchers have identified some promising candidates for the NCC. For instance, it seems that consciousness isn't located in one single spot in the brain, but rather involves widespread coordinated activity across different brain regions, particularly in the cerebral cortex. A leading idea is that for you to be conscious of something, there needs to be a certain kind of communication between the front and the back of your brain. One popular theory that builds on this is called the global workspace theory. It was proposed by Dr. Bernard Bars. Again, imagine your brain is like a theater. Most of the activity in your brain is happening backstage, in the dark. These are the unconscious processes. But when a piece of information is important enough, it gets broadcast onto the stage under the spotlight. This stage is the global workspace. And once information is there, it's available to all the different systems in your brain. It's available to your memory, to your language centers, to your planning centers. So, according to this theory, this global availability is consciousness. So, it's an intuitive idea, right? It explains why we can only be conscious of a few things at a time. There's only so much room on the stage. And it explains why conscious information is so useful. It allows us to integrate information and then to use it in flexible ways. But here's the thing. This theory also aligns with our everyday experience of conscious attention. Think about when you're trying to focus on a friend's story in a noisy cafe. Your brain is filtering out irrelevant noises and highlighting that one voice, broadcasting it onto the stage so you can understand and respond. The global workspace theory gives us a framework to understand this spotlight of awareness. But let me add a little more nuance here. The global workspace isn't just a passive stage, it's dynamic and competitive. Think of it more like a bustling newsroom where different stories vie for the editor's attention. Only the most compelling, relevant information gets the headline spot. This competition shapes what we become conscious of, filtering out the noise and prioritizing what's most important for survival or for goal achievement. And what about unconscious processes? They're not just background noise. They're powerful and often drive much of our behavior without us even realizing it. For example, when you're driving a familiar route, much of what you do is unconscious. You might arrive without recalling the details of the journey. Consciousness then steps in when there's something new or challenging, like a detour, or an unexpected pedestrian steps off the curb. Another fascinating theory is called the Integrated Information Theory, and that's abbreviated the IIT. And this was developed by a neuroscientist named Giulio Tononi. IIT proposes that consciousness is a measure of a system's integrated information, which it calls phi. The more a system's parts are interconnected and the more information they share in a way that can't be broken down, the higher its phi and the more conscious it is. What's radical about IIT is that it suggests consciousness isn't limited to biological brains. In principle, any system with a high enough phi could be conscious. Even theoretically, a complex machine, or AI. IIT also predicts that a system can be conscious even if it's not doing anything, as long as it has the right kind of complex integrated structure. This could explain why we're still conscious when we're dreaming, even though we're not interacting with the outside world. Now think about that for a moment. IIT challenges our traditional assumptions about consciousness being exclusive to humans or animals. It opens up a whole new set of questions. Could future AI systems achieve a form of consciousness? What ethical implications would that have? It's a rapidly evolving field that blends neuroscience, mathematics, and philosophy in fascinating ways. Here's something else to consider. IIT proposes a quantitative measure of consciousness. While consciousness feels deeply subjective and qualitative, IIT attempts to put a number on it, phi. This approach tries to bring consciousness into the realm of empirical science, moving beyond just philosophical speculation. Now, I want to go a little deeper into what integrated information truly means in this regard. So imagine you have a puzzle. Each piece on its own gives you some information, but only when you connect pieces together do you get the full picture. The puzzle's image is more than the sum of its individual pieces. Similarly, In IIT, consciousness arises when parts of a system are not just connected, but interconnected in such a way that the whole contains more information than the sum of its parts. This also suggests that consciousness has a structure. It's not just on or off, but has qualities determined by how information is integrated. It's like a symphony where the melody, harmony, rhythm, and instruments together create a unique musical piece. The structure of the symphony shapes your experience, just as the structure of integrated information shapes the quality of consciousness. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. IIT also predicts that simple systems with low phi, like a photodiode or a thermostat, have almost no consciousness, while complex systems like human brains have very high phi and thus rich consciousness. This spectrum of consciousness challenges the traditional binary of conscious versus unconscious. And it invites us to think more fluidly about awareness. Now, as if those theories weren't mind-bending enough, let's venture into some even more speculative territory. What if consciousness isn't just about complex information processing? What if it involves something even more fundamental about the nature of reality? This brings us to quantum theories of consciousness. And don't turn this off or run away. We're not going to be presenting the theory of relativity. We're just going to do a little overview here. But the most famous of these quantum theories of consciousness is called the orchestrated objective reduction, or the ARC-OR theory. This was proposed by physicist Sir Roger Penrose and an anesthesiologist named Dr. Stuart Hameroff. My husband and I had an opportunity to hear Sir Roger speak in person at a consciousness conference some years ago in Arizona. Penrose and Hameroff argue that our classical understanding of the brain as a sort of biologic computer is insufficient to explain the richness and mystery of consciousness. Instead, they propose that consciousness arises from quantum computations happening inside tiny structures within our neurons called microtubules. According to their theory, these microtubules can maintain a state of quantum coherence, and when this coherence collapses, it gives rise to a moment of conscious experience. Now, admittedly, it's a controversial idea, and most neuroscientists are skeptical. But it's a powerful reminder that we shouldn't close our minds to radical possibilities. I mean, at one time, the concept that the Earth was round was a pretty radical idea. Imagine the brain not just as an electrical network, but as a quantum processor, where subatomic events influence the very fabric of conscious experience. This idea connects the tiny world of quantum mechanics with the vast complexity of the brain, two realms that traditionally have only been studied separately. And Sir Roger Penrose is the man who provided the crucial mathematical proof in 1965 that black holes are a natural consequence of general relativity and not just theoretical curiosities. This earned him the 2020 Nobel Prize in Physics. So he is somebody worth listening to, perhaps. Now, quantum mechanics itself is famously strange. Particles can exist in multiple states at once, and actions in one place can instantly affect distant particles, a phenomenon called entanglement, and something that Albert Einstein called spooky action at a distance. Penrose and Hameroff's OR theory suggests that the brain harnesses these quantum phenomena to produce consciousness. Now, if you'd like to learn more about quantum mechanics, you can visit my website at vickidraeger.com and look at my curriculum for introducing middle and high school students to quantum mechanics. I've taught it to youth ages 11 to 13, and they weren't in a gifted class. It was a class with children of all ability levels. And actually, quantum mechanics, just an overview, is accessible to anybody with a curious mind. Now, here's something that might surprise you. The brain is a warm, wet environment, which many physicists think is too noisy for delicate quantum states to survive. However, Hameroff and Penrose argue that microtubules are specially structured to protect these quantum states long enough to influence neural processing. If true, this would revolutionize our understanding of brain function. Even if OR turns out to be incorrect, it has spurred new thinking about the possible roles of quantum processes in biology. Fields like quantum biology are investigating how quantum effects might play a role in photosynthesis, in bird navigation, and even in our sense of smell. Now, what if we go even further? What if consciousness isn't something that arises from matter at all, but is instead a fundamental property of matter itself? This is the ancient idea of something called panpsychism. Panpsychism is the view that consciousness in some very basic form is everywhere and in everything. It's not that your coffee cup is thinking about its day, but rather that the fundamental particles that make up your coffee cup have some rudimentary form of experience. Then, in complex systems like brains, these tiny bits of consciousness combine to form the rich, complex consciousness that we experience. This might sound strange, but it has a certain appeal. It eloquently avoids the hard problem. If consciousness is fundamental, then we don't have to explain how it emerges from non-conscious stuff. Think about it this way. If consciousness is like a basic building block, akin to electric charges or mass, then it's everywhere, woven into the fabric of reality, just as atoms combine to form molecules. Maybe these basic conscious elements combine to form the complex awareness that we experience and call consciousness. Of course, panpsychism has its own major hurdle, which is often called the combination problem. How do these tiny, simple bits of consciousness combine to create a single, unified consciousness like yours or mine? It's a deep puzzle, but a growing number of philosophers and scientists are taking panpsychism seriously as a potential solution to the mystery of consciousness. Interestingly, some proponents of panpsychism find support in the work of modern physics, particularly in theories exploring the fundamental nature of matter and information. It's a reminder that science and philosophy often dance together, each informing the other. And here's a fascinating analogy. Imagine you have millions of tiny pixels on a screen. Each pixel emits a bit of light, but it's only when they all work together that you see a coherent, vivid image. Panpsychism suggests that consciousness might be like that image, arising from the pixels of micro-consciousness in basic particles. This view also resonates with some Eastern philosophical traditions, which have long posited that consciousness pervades the universe. It's a beautiful example of how ancient wisdom and modern science can sometimes converge in unexpected ways. Many people, including philosophers, theologians, and spiritual practitioners, believe that consciousness is the soul. or at least the primary expression of it. They often argue that the soul is not merely an abstract concept, but the essential, non-physical I, our experiencer, that persists beyond the physical body and brain. They believe that when the soul leaves the body, consciousness leaves with it, implying the soul is the seat of life and awareness. Finally, there's the idea of consciousness as an emergent property. Think about water. A single molecule of H2O isn't wet. But when you get a whole bunch of them together, the property of wetness emerges from their interactions. Similarly, a single neuron isn't conscious. But perhaps when you put 86 billion of them together in a human brain and have them interact in incredibly complex ways, the property of consciousness emerges. This is perhaps the most common view right now among neuroscientists. It suggests that there's no secret sauce or new physics or quantum physics that's required. Consciousness is simply what a complex, interconnected system like the brain does. The challenge, of course, is to explain how and why this emergence happens. Why does a brain produce consciousness, while other complex systems, like a galaxy or an economy, presumably don't? Or do they? Here's another analogy for you. Once again, think of a symphony orchestra. Each musician plays their part, but the music, the experience of the symphony, is more than just the sum of individual notes. It emerges from the interaction and coordination of all the players. Similarly, consciousness might emerge from the incredibly complex interplay of neurons firing, connecting, and communicating. Emergence also suggests that consciousness might be fragile and dynamic, just as a symphony can falter if one section is out of sync. Our consciousness can change or fade with brain injury, sleep, or anesthesia. This ties back to the search for neural correlates, identifying what brain activity supports that emergent experience. And here's a compelling thought. Emergent consciousness means that the brain is not just a passive receiver of information, but an active constructor of experience. So it's like a jazz band improvising in real time, constantly creating novel patterns out of familiar elements. This dynamic quality may explain the fluid, ever-changing nature of consciousness. Furthermore, emergent theories encourage us to explore how different brain states relate to different levels or kinds of consciousness. For example, the consciousness you experience when you're alert and focused differs from the dream consciousness you have during REM sleep, or the altered states induced by meditation or psychedelics. Each state reflects a different pattern of neural interaction and integration. My next episode will focus on the consciousness of animals. Following that, I'll present an episode on the altered consciousness state known as hypnosis. And then we will look at unconsciousness. But for today, here's the takeaway. Consciousness is at once the most familiar and the most mysterious part of our experience and our existence. It's what makes you, you, your thoughts, feelings, memories, and experiences. And even though we don't have all the answers yet, every new discovery brings us closer to understanding this incredible phenomenon. And here's something to ponder as you go about your day. The next time you catch yourself lost in thought or fully absorbed in a moment, Marvel at the fact that this rich inner world is happening inside your brain, generated by the interplay of billions of cells, yet experienced uniquely by you. It's a reminder of the wonder of being conscious and the endless curiosity it inspires in all of us. So where does that leave us? We've journeyed through a dizzying array of theories, from the concrete search for neural correlates to the abstract idea that the universe itself is conscious. What's clear is that there is no consensus. We are still in the very early days of understanding what consciousness is and how it fits into our scientific picture of the world. I want to ask your brain to do 3 small things that make a big difference. Follow this podcast, like this episode, and subscribe. When you follow, like, and subscribe, your app saves Blossoming Brains for you and reminds you when new episodes come out. Follow so you can find the podcast again. Like so the apps know this episode was valuable. Subscribe so your brain gets a gentle reminder to keep growing with us. So, one more time, for your beautiful, busy brain, follow the podcast, like this episode, and subscribe to Blossoming Brains wherever you're listening or watching. Is consciousness an emergent property of complex brains? A fundamental feature of the universe? Is it our soul? Or is it something else entirely? The truth is, we don't know. But the search for an answer is one of the most exciting and profound quests in all of human inquiry. It's a journey that forces us to confront the deepest questions about who we are and our place in the cosmos. It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from the poem A Man Said to the Universe by Stephen Crane, published in 1899. A man said to the universe, "Sir, I exist." "However," replied the universe, "the fact has not created in me a sense of obligation." So here's the thing. Consciousness touches every part of our lives. It shapes our emotions, our decisions, our creativity, and our very sense of self. Understanding it better could revolutionize medicine, AI, psychology, and even theology and ethics. Imagine being able to diagnose disorders of consciousness with precision, or create AI that truly understands human feelings. Or imagine how philosophical and spiritual traditions might integrate new scientific insights about consciousness, just the way it had to integrate new scientific insights about the Earth not being the center of the universe. And here's something to ponder. As AI technologies rapidly advance, the question of machine consciousness becomes not just theoretical, but practical. What rights, responsibilities, or ethical considerations might we owe to a conscious machine? Could consciousness become a criterion for moral consideration beyond biological life? These are no longer just sci-fi questions. They're urgent topics in technology and ethics today. And that brings us to our call to action for this week. I encourage you to simply take a moment to be mindful of your own consciousness. Pay attention to the richness of your experience, the colors, the sounds, the thoughts, the emotions. Reflect on the fact that you are a conscious being, capable of experiencing the universe. It's a gift and a mystery, and it's happening right now. So try this. Close your eyes for a minute and focus on your breathing. Notice the sensations, the rhythm. Notice the thoughts that come and go without judgment. This simple act of mindfulness brings you face to face with your conscious experience, the very thing that we've been exploring today. You might engage in metacognition. Metacognition is thinking about thinking. the ability to actively monitor, plan, and evaluate one's own learning and cognitive processes. It involves understanding how you learn best, assessing your knowledge, and adjusting strategies to improve performance. This skill transforms passive learners into active, self-regulated thinkers and lifelong learners. Do you learn best visually? Do you learn best auditorially? Do you learn best when your hands are engaged and you're feeling things? So now, just a brief look at the link between mindfulness, metacognition, and consciousness. Have you ever caught yourself thinking, I should know this? Or felt a surge of confidence after solving a tricky problem? That's metacognition in action. Your brain's ability to think about its own thinking. It's like having a little manager in your head that monitors your thoughts, knowledge, and strategies. Consciousness, on the other hand, is the movie of your mind, the stream of sensations, thoughts, and feelings that make up your subjective experience of being alive. So what's the connection between the two? Many scientists and philosophers believe that metacognition is a key ingredient in the recipe for consciousness. Yet another of the popular theories about consciousness is the higher order theory, HOT, H-O-T, the higher order theory of consciousness. Imagine you're looking at a bunch of purple grapes. The simple act of seeing the grapes is a first-order mental state. According to HOT, this experience only becomes conscious when you have a higher-order thought about it, something like, I am seeing a bunch of purple grapes. That higher-order thought is a form of metacognition. You're not just seeing, you're aware that you're seeing. The theory suggests that the prefrontal cortex, that brain region that is heavily involved in planning and self-awareness, is crucial for this process. In essence, while you can have unconscious metacognitive processes and you can be conscious of things without actively thinking about your own thoughts, the two are deeply entwined. Metacognition provides the self-awareness that is a hallmark of conscious experience. It's the difference between simply being conscious and knowing that you're conscious. That's metacognition. When René Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, he was providing an example of metacognition. So now you might be asking, so then where does mindfulness come in? Is it the same as metacognition? Not really, although again they overlap in that both require you to be aware of your own mind, but they differ in what they do with that awareness. Mindfulness is one doorway into metacognitive awareness, but metacognition is a broader cognitive system that extends well beyond what mindfulness alone covers. So I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Blossoming Brains. If you feel inspired, share your thoughts and experiences with us on our social media channels. How does thinking about consciousness change the way you see yourself or the world? We'd love to hear your stories. And don't forget to share your stories and thoughts and share them with other people that might be interested. You can find references for today's podcast at my website, vickidraeger.com. Now, until next week, when we will explore the exciting world of animal consciousness, thank you for joining me on this episode of Blossoming Brains. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep blossoming. Thank you.